big story in the Sunday Times. ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule is alleged to be backing Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane in her probe into her fitness to hold office. Now, this impeachment process for Mkhwebane was brought forward by the Democratic Alliance and is reportedly due to commence this week. The Sunday Times reports that Magashule told the publication yesterday that principled ANC members would not vote in support of the motion brought by the DA. Magashule adds that the DA's motion is part of the opposition's strategy to divide the ANC. But what could Mkhwebane's removal mean for the ANC and the alleged factions that exist within the party? Joining us to discuss this is political analyst Khanya Bonani. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. What would all of this really mean when it comes to having the Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane out of that position?
Good morning, Paul, and to the viewers. I think it would be a big blow, and I mean, it's not just about Ace, and obviously there's been a lot of allegations around Busisiwe Mkhwebane being on the Ace Magashule faction. I think it's also a huge thing for the country. I mean, we've never been in a position where a public protector could be recalled, one, and two, we've never been in a position to really interrogate whether the Chapter 9 institution should actually have a public protector be appointed in the way that it currently has. So it sets into motion a lot of questions around structure, a lot of questions around whether or not, Chapter 9 institution heads, as much as they are being processed through the legislative arm, does it now mean that they have to be according to a party line, so to speak? I think that is the big question that one has to ask oneself when looking at this entire conversation. I think it's a little bit preemptive, though, that Ace Magashule is willing to take such a big step on the eve of the National Working Committee meeting within the ANC that's happening tomorrow. But it would be interesting to see how the outcome of that meeting will shape the ANC MP caucus's direction.
You say it's preemptive of him to speak of this, and there's a very clever use of word here where he said that principled ANC MPs would not vote in support of the motion brought by the DA. I mean, principled for a man who's really facing a lot of criticism and some allegations.
I mean, the allegations, whether it's him, whether it's Busisiwe, they're damning. They're not something to be played with. And particularly in this scenario whereby it's not just, one or two missteps. It's major errors that are being made. So I think that with Ace Magashule, he needs to be mindful now, especially with the outcome of tomorrow's meeting, of how he's going to navigate caucus, because at the end of the day, he doesn't manage caucus. He has to be mindful of players like Yopemi Majodinas. He has to be mindful of, who is running the show in Cape Town and how to manage the audience around that. I mean, saying that principal members of the ANC won't vote with the DA was on the basis that people like, for example, when David Makura was being had a vote of no confidence and the DA was behind that. I mean, it was a clever example to use to remind the ANC caucus that there are lines that DA are willing to cross in order to ensure that their mandate and their strategic outlook works for them and is framed well within the public gallery.
Even with such damning findings against Mkhwebane, there appears to be some MPs who are in agreement with the ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule, willing to back Mkhwebane. What does this now speak to, especially as we know that the ANC Women's League as well as the MKMVA have also put out publicly their views and their support for Mkhwebane? The only part that we're not really sure of right now is where the ANC NEC stands.
I think it's been interesting seeing structures like the Women's League and the MK veterans come out and make such staunch, hardened views, which is ironic considering the kind of environment South Africa is in right now, not just politically, but also in public discourse. You know, the Women's League can make a statement for Busisiwe Mkhwebane saying that the behavior and the way in which these impeachment hearings are being treated unfair, especially for women, but they can't even, appear when it comes to important matters like GBV in the country. It's a bit quizzical how they turn up, and when they do turn up, who they show support to. As much as Busisiwe is a woman and she's head of an office of that magnitude, one needs to remember that, the factional battle lines are also being clearly drawn in the sand when it comes to issues of the Bancorp investigation. When it comes to the CR17 funding investigation, it really sort of sets, a very clear statement in terms of, okay, who are we coming after and for what purposes? And I think, MVA is known for drawing lines in the sand, particularly when it comes to factional battles. So that statement was no surprise. I mean, the MPs that are backing her are the same people who have probably been backing her since October 2016. I think the question now is, are we willing to go down to the wire again? Because, I mean, in order for the proceedings to continue and to actually be in full swing, they need about 201 votes to pass it. However, are we going down the same dangerous line? Are we willing to go down to the wire to do the same thing for Busisiwe Mkhwebane compared to a Jacob Zuma? Do we protect at all costs? And is it worth it considering the office and the structure that is at stake here? I think that is a question that MPs really need to ask themselves. Being principled is amazing. I mean, we went to 8 votes of no confidence when it came to Jacob Zuma. But at the end of the day, what is our stance? What is our immediate understanding of the public protector? Is it about a win-loss ratio? Is it about the factual analysis and the arguments and the interpretation of the law? Which one is it? And again, it sort of brings into question again, cadre deployment. Are we going to willingly defend a cadre who may not be right for the post for the sake of factional battles?
I think that with the noise around this matter and Ace Magashule's call, what's quite telling is the tone that National Assembly Speaker Thandi Modise has taken. She's spoken out this week telling MPs that Parliament simply cannot afford to ignore the findings this time around. And, she did express that it would be a very sad day. And just as I read here, she says, I must say it up front that with the report that all of you party leaders have in your hands, we don't want a committee stage because then we would really be putting democracy in this country to shame. Really quite telling in the direction and the seriousness of this matter.
I think it was good on her to actually set that tone as she did. I mean, I think one of the great things about Thandi Modise is that she can separate the party from her actual duty to the Republic. And I think that is the important thing we need to remember throughout this process. What is the structure that we're defending? And if the structure is something that is beneficial to ordinary citizens, then this impeachment proceeding shouldn't be it shouldn't be seen as an impasse. It should be part of democratic practice.
Do you now think that it comes by accident that the ANC's parliamentary caucus is packed with loyalists and those who back former President Jacob Zuma, the likes of ANC Secretary Ace Magashule, Msebenzi Zwane, Faith Mutambi, and the likes?
It's not a surprise. I think in many respects it's also disappointing because one of the things that the ANC has admitted over the last 25 plus years is that, the public service has been deprofessionalized to a certain extent. And I feel like the loyalists being packed within the caucus, they knew that there's going to come a day and an issue where they were not going to agree. They were willing to take all of their factional battle loaned out to ensure that this isn't a walk in the park, that there's no specific faction that is operating at ease in Cape Town. However, are we going to put ourselves in a position every single time? And this is not just for the ANC, it's for all of the parties. Are we always going to put ourselves in a position whereby the professional outlook, professional deliverables are to be second best to, what a lawyer wants at the end of the day?
And
I think it's something
lastly, if you allow me to interrupt you, just for the sake of time, Khanya,
sure.
We also know that as we really assess the damning charges and what's at stake here, we cannot ignore those court judgments. I mean, just take a look at the outcome and the botched probe that Mkhwebane did into the Frieda dairy farm.
I think it's more than just the Frieda dairy farm. I think that with track record, especially in the past 2 years, there have been a lot of questionable decisions that have been made to, to build cases, to bring to how she's interpreted the law, the perjury charges, the costs to the Constitutional Court that she had to incur after her loss. There are a lot of things where you have to start asking, okay, how is the structure of the Public Protector's Office managed? And how are final decisions made? She was on an interview once, I think last year sometime, where people were asking her, who actually manages the cases, And she said, I don't get all of the cases. I probably get, 10, 20% of these cases that come to me. So I'm like, if it's an issue of discernment and issue of whether she can actually do the professional capacities of the job, then we find ourselves in a situation where we have to investigate. We have to unpack. Is this her? Is this the work that she's meant to do? And also you have to start questioning the structural demands and the structural outlook of the team that is under her and that is behind all of these cases that are now making it to court. Not to say that the public protector is not important to the public and the duties and its duties as a Chapter 9 institution. But I think what we're going to learn through this impeachment proceeding is how these Chapter 9s are inherently built. How are their foundations made to last? And how do we now, fix the places and the gaps whereby, things like this can slip through the cracks? Court finding after court finding, where things don't add up.
Mm-hmm. I suppose all eyes will be on those processes this week, of course, as we focus our attention on what the outcome will be. Some important questions there, Khanya. Thank you so much for your time, political analyst Khanya Bonani, giving us a sense of what it all means as ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule has called on MPs to back embattled Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane.